Hello, BJ, and welcome to Anti-Aging Uncensored podcast.
Hi, Jill. Thank you for inviting me.
I can't tell you how excited I am and honored that you're joining me here today. We haven't even officially launched yet. We'll be launching in a couple of weeks. But I just want to start by saying I am a huge, huge fan of yours. And I have been following your work on behavior change for years now. About, I think it was like 7, maybe 8 years ago. I didn't go back and do it, but I really started hearing a lot of buzz around the work that you were doing because it aligned with my work producing the Digital Health Summit at CES. And so many of the companies that I got to work with were developing really innovative products and tools. But when it came to getting usage, like long-term, everything was like engagement and use.
Yes.
Engagement was like the name of the game, but it wasn't just engagement. There was like initial engagement and then, And I just don't think there was this, attention to designing for engagement and designing for a long-term use and what that meant, that it's not just, like physical design. It was so much more than that. And so I kept hearing how many people turned to you and that were working from you and learning from you. I'm sure we all have our drawers of like empty Fitbits and tech and, what do they call it? The graveyard?
I have one of
wearables
those.
Graveyard.
I have one of those. Walk down memory lane when you pull out the devices and it's like, I remember when I was so excited to unbox this. And now it's a paperweight.
Exactly. Well, most of our things are. Like, I'm looking at my Apple Watch right now and it feels like ancient. So I wanted to first congratulate you on your New York Times bestselling book, Tiny Habits.
Thank you.
It really spoke to me, who's someone gets stuck often and stuck in my ways, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But before we dive into the book and kind of unpacking all the good stuff, tell us a little bit about your work just with Stanford University's, you founded the Behavior Design Lab, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I have long been interested in behavior. I went to Stanford to do my doctorate to understand the overlap of technology and behavior change, and kept a foot in the door at Stanford running a lab. And it's not like the president of Stanford or department chair said, hey, BJ, here's your budget to create a lab. It was that students wanted to work with me because I was teaching. And, I had a foot in Silicon Valley, a foot at Stanford, which is a weird balance, but I was able to maintain it. And just to keep working with the students and do research, we first met in the student union, right? We had no space. It was just like, we're going to meet in the student union.
Yeah.
And then, a few months, maybe it was a year later, a philosophy professor of all things said, oh, do you want part of my office? And he had a huge office. So we had a quarter of a room. And then it went from there.
It's like your clubhouse.
Yeah, sort of that, and you don't have to have a physical space to have a lab. But my point, and we raised our own money by doing conferences, and the NSF gave us some money to do some work. And it really was a startup within Stanford. In other words, it wasn't top down. It was like, hey, we want to do this thing. Let's just do it. And we don't even wait for permission officially. You just start, and as you provide value and as you get results, then people open the doors for you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good lesson. I used to find that if we waited for validation, I used to work in the film industry, and we would have to pitch ideas to studios, right? And I found that if we waited for the director to get on board or the actor or whatever it was that we needed, there would be no momentum, and that you just got to kind of go out there and get it, right?
Yeah. Even within a big organization, think of it as a side hustle within that organization. Yeah.
Interesting. Sure. And behavior. This was a new thing. You were probably talking about, people were like, we're already addicted to the TV. We're already behavior change wasn't probably a huge thing when it came to technology at that point.
No,
right?
People thought I was a little bit crazy. I mean, at the time, it was about ease of use and usability and user friendliness. And I mapped out the waves and I said, yeah, that's happened. Networking, now it's ease of use. Next thing will be persuasion and behavior change. And people, and I published a book on it in 2002,
Okay.
which said, here's how to understand the landscape, here's what I'm predicting will happen, and here are the dangers of it, right? And people just thought I was kind of a little crazy. That book did not do well. I mean, it came out probably 10 years too early. And
You're a pioneer.
well, and that's nice, but it's got some downsides. But
Yep.
in about 10 years ago, we as a lab, we're just not that interested in technology anymore. So we had done what we thought laid the foundation, sounded the alarms, including doing a testimony to the FTC saying, here's what's going to happen, and we need to create policy. That was 2006. And then our work shifted to just look at human habits in general, having nothing to do with technology. And how do you understand behavior and help people create lasting change and engagement?
Right.
And so at that point, when we realized we weren't the persuasive technology lab, we sort of sunsetted that, and the behavior design lab then in 2011 became the entity that my students would join, and we went forward from there. And so the behavior design lab, we've done a variety of things. But I think one way to summarize it, it's about new ways of understanding human behavior and new methods for designing for positive outcomes like healthy habits.
Yeah, that's such a perfect application of this.
Yeah.
So let's start with some basics, okay?
Okay.
How would you define a successful habit versus habits that just don't serve us well? Is that easily definable?
Oh, there's a few facets. I'll take two angles to it.
Okay.
A successful habit is one that you do quite automatically, quite reliably, and you don't have to exert willpower or, force yourself to do it. And it serves you in some way. It makes you feel better, it makes you healthier, it connects you to people that matter more, it helps you be more productive, or it helps you relax better. So I would put it those two facets. The opposite would be a behavior, and this is where the two different kind of perspectives come in. A behavior that you're like, oh, I really do need to go get on the treadmill for an hour, and you kind of get yourself to do it, but you've got to use willpower. You kind of have to trick yourself into it. You don't love it. The other kind of unwelcome habit is something you do that really sets you back in the long term. It might have momentary pleasure. There might be some benefit or some pleasure you get from it, but it's really not serving your higher goals or your bigger purpose.
So that makes sense that we're struggling. There's a struggle behind the actual action of whatever it is that we should do. So
sometimes, yes.
Versus the autopilot.
Yeah.
Versus autopilot. So what causes or triggers a change in our behaviors?
Oh, what a good, difficult question.
Yeah,
Jill,
I know.
This would be such a good question in my Stanford seminar.
Oh, sorry. Am I going too deep?
No,
we'll get
this is great.
We'll get to our women in a minute.
Oh my gosh, the question was okay. Ask me the question again, and I will do.
So
a
I believe you developed your own model around this from
yes.
what I recall. But what triggers us to change, a change in our behaviors?
One way to think about behavior, and I think it's the way to think about behavior, at least the fundamental way, is a behavior happens when three things come together at the same moment. You're motivated to do the behavior, you're able to do the behavior, and there's a prompt. There's something that reminds you. There's something that says, do this behavior now. And when those three things converge, you do the behavior. Whether it's like an unhealthy habit, you're prompted to eat the whole chocolate bar and it's sitting there on the counter, boom. Or it could be something that's, you go to bed early, your spouse prompts you and you're motivated and you're able. So whether we consider it a good behavior, and if you're watching the video, I'm doing air quotes around good and bad, good and bad. Whether it's good behavior, bad behavior, and behavior is the broad category. Right. A subset of behavior is habit. So habit is a type of behavior. So all behaviors are a function of you're prompted when you have ability and motivation to do it, it always comes back to those three things.
So, and I know that you address this a lot in the book, and we'll kind of dive into it a little bit more, but taking on too much seems to be a
Mm-hmm.
really common issue. Why is
Why do we
that
do it?
such a challenge? Like, I want to say, like, why are we idiots? Which we're not, but,
Yeah,
we're
I will give
ambitious.
I will give a behavior related explanation. I mean, we
Okay.
could go back to our culture and our childhood and
Okay.
all of that, but let me ground it in behavior. When we are sitting down, let's say January 1st or early in the year, there are periods of time when we are unusually motivated, like early in the year, or somebody just has a baby, or things happen,
Something
and your
triggers.
motivation goes up to improve your life.
Hmm.
When that motivation goes up, you people often set goals or decide they're going to do something really big. And in that moment, with high motivation, they are they're capable of doing hard things.
Hmm.
So because the motivation goes up, we people often connect themselves with, oh, every day I'm going to meditate for an hour. I will for sure. And every day I'm going to walk on that treadmill. And every day I'm going to journal. And every day I'm going to call my mom. But what happens, what we're not good at anticipating, and it's human nature, is that our motivation's going to vary. It's going to sag. It's going to drop. Okay? And when your motivation goes down, you no longer can do hard behaviors. Right? And so if it's a hard behavior, you need motivation to do it. But we're human beings and our motivation shifts around. So that means at the moment of sort of planning or deciding, we're super motivated and we feel like we can do it. And we don't anticipate the fact that our motivation is going to shift. Therefore, we set
Yeah.
ourselves up with things that are really unrealistic to continue in the long term. And it's a common mistake. It's all around
It
us.
is so common. I mean, you'd think by, I'm in my early 50s, and now it's like you'd think I'd learned my lesson. Um, so I find that the older I get, the more set in my
Mm,
ways I
mm,
become, right?
mm.
And I mean, I use the word complacent. I don't know that everyone can relate to that word complacent, but I do believe that, I have spent many years, too many years, developing habits that don't serve me well. Um, and I feel like, well, God, it's like too late. I am way too set in my ways. Like it's too late. And so I am curious. Well, I definitely want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to talk about, like, do you find that there's an age group that has an easier
Yeah.
time developing habits? Like, are women like in our
Yeah.
40s and 50s and on? Like, is it just, should we be throwing
No.
up our
Okay. I've got really good news for you, Jill, and everybody listening to this.
Okay.
It's not too late to change. It's not too late to create habits. I felt that way. I mean, I'd gained, oh my gosh, during a really stressful period of my life. This was before Tiny Habits. And in part, all the stress and all the worry caused me to figure out this method, because I thought, oh my gosh, BJ, if you don't get on top of these problems, and some were physical and some were
Wow.
sleep and some were relationship, you're not going to be able to turn the corner. So you need to do it now. Now,
Wow.
that was helpful to think of it that way, but that was not true. I have a friend here in Maui, and she's 92. She loves tiny habits. She applies tiny habits in her life. She continues to blossom and expand at 92 years old. So no, it's not too late. What I think there's a correlation
Hmm.
between age and maybe getting stagnant, but age doesn't cause it. Okay, it's caused by other things. One, the environment around you really, to a large degree, dictates the behaviors you do. And when you're a college student, at least when I was a college student,
Hmm.
every semester, every year, I moved into a new apartment or condo. I had new roommates. So by having that new environment,
Constant new.
constant change, constant
Good.
try this, try this. Oh yeah, I'll go watch you do
Good.
folk dancing. Maybe I'll join folk dancing. Okay. So now that we're older, we are more in the same environment with the same neighbor. So notice it's not the age that's causing it, it's the fact that our environments are more stable. That's factor number one. So don't,
Okay,
so
ladies, we
yeah, see, so
we
it's
can't give
not
up.
age, it's environment. And you can shift that up and you can play around with it. Number two is, yeah, as we get older, we get wiser and we've kind of figured things out. Like right here in my hand, I have a blue pen.
Hmm.
This is my favorite pen. Okay. In college, I was exploring all sorts of pens. I now know what the best pen is. So I'm not exploring anymore. So it's not a bad thing that I just use the same pen. It's just like I've figured it out now.
You know what you like now, and
Yeah, exactly.
that is really good.
So those two things add up to it's not age, it's and so that means the opportunity to create new habits, to change, is still 100% available to us. I'm almost 60, and I'm always playing around with my habits. It's you when you know the right way to do it, the best way, it's fun. It's like this journey of discovery. It's uplifting.
I love it. I love it. It's really good. So before we're going to dive into tiny habits in a second, but I have one more question, and
Okay.
it's around the concept of motivation. So why is it not the reason that we fail? So because I keep saying motivation is a myth for me
Hmm.
because I feel like if I waited around in my bed to get up and go work out, well, I'd still be there, right? Like that this like sweeping wind of motivation isn't going to infiltrate my body and carry me to all the good
Yeah.
stuff I want to do. That it's stuff I don't really want to do. I'm not driven to do it. I know I need to do it. So I'm
Yeah.
using the bike as an example for me, but it's like it could be anything, by the way. It could be food you prepare.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's one of the things that again, in this troubled period, I discovered one of the things is to focus on new habits that you want, not habits you feel like you should have. And then later, I taught this method to thousands and thousands of people. I stopped counting at 40,000, and it's the right way to go. If you pick a habit that feels like a should, or
mm,
if you pick something that you want to be a habit that feels like a should, it does not reliably become a habit. Those are the
okay,
things we struggle with.
good.
So, within the broader domain, I'll give an example of physical activity. There's a whole bunch of reasons to be physically active, and you have hundreds of options. And if you don't like walking on the treadmill, look for something
Find
else.
something else. Yeah.
You don't like your exercise bike? Bam, find something else. In my own life right now, I'm living in Maui. I surf every morning. This morning I was out there and it was still dark. I was just waiting. I mean, it was that early.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
okay, it's got to get a little lighter so I don't get attacked by the sharks. Okay, now I can go. And so I'm
I'm so
getting
glad you.
up at like
I'm so
4 in the
glad you didn't
morning.
get caught eaten by a
I know
shark this
I
morning.
couldn't be here. But the point is find
Yeah.
find habits, whether it's physical activity
Find
or the
something.
way you eat or the way you connect with people. Don't assume, like, if you don't like to meditate, don't assume you have to meditate. For me, what has replaced meditation is playing a flute. So I play this tenor flute, which requires a lot of wind. And what it does is it gives me the same kind of breathing, but yet I'm playing music.
Yeah.
And so for me, I love that. In fact, this morning, this would be more like four something, I went outside the house into a stairwell and I played in the stairwell and it sounded like I was in a cathedral, which was so gratifying. Okay,
Yeah.
so don't force yourself to create habits on things you don't like. Instead, spend that energy
Yeah.
and find other habits that serve the purpose of, calming yourself or connecting with nature or being physically active, things that you like. Now, it might take some exploration, experimentation, and that's really part of the process. Is think of it, you're playing around, you're exploring, you're goofing around,
Hmm.
and not too serious. Just sort of like you're shopping for shoes. You don't just pick one pair and say, these have to work for me. Well, maybe
That's
some people
true.
do. But imagine you're
Yeah.
trying on
I
different ones and you're like, you might, and it's like, bam, the 12th pair, that's the one for me. So allow yourself the same kind of flexibility as you're bringing habits into your life.
That is good advice. That is great advice. So let's dive in a little bit to tiny habits, and you know, tell us about what a tiny habit is, why it's
Yeah.
important, and where do we start?
Yeah, well, let me give Jill.
Your spiel.
I've never explained it quite this way, so this is not my spiel.
Sorry.
I love novelty. Okay, I love novelty. I love spontaneity. So it's kind of funny that I'm the habits guy, and it's not haha funny. It's odd, but I think that's good because I'm not naturally routinized. So for me, like you don't want to learn to play music from Mozart, right? That's not helpful. You want to learn from somebody who struggled with it because they understand
Mm,
you. And so that's where I'm coming from. So even I was a behavior scientist, it doesn't mean I'm naturally good at habits. So I'll just give some examples of things I do that use the tiny habits method, and then I'll come back and explain it.
okay.
Uh, After I put my feet on the floor in the morning as I'm getting out of bed, I say, it's going to be a great day. After I pee, I do 2 push-ups. After I pack my little surfing bag with water and coffee, I get on my bulletproof vibration plate and loosen up. After I reach the water's edge with my surfboard, I
Hmm.
pause for a moment and I give gratitude and I dedicate myself to making the most of the day. After I get in the car on my way home from surfing, I call my parents and chit chat on the way home. So those are all habits that I do in the morning. I've designed them into my life. They work really well for me. And so Tiny Habits has this, I call it a recipe. After something you already do, like get up or pee or get in the car, I will, that's when you insert the new habit. So you're finding a habit like a gratitude habit, and it's like, where does this fit in my day? And guess where it fits for me? As soon as I get to I'm getting chills because it's
I
such an
love
important
this.
habit for me. It's so appropriate. It just fits so well right there that as soon as I get to the water's edge before I get on, it's like this spiritual moment. That's where this moment of gratitude and kind of dedicating myself to a higher purpose fits in. And then calling my parents, yeah, I could call them in the evening, but I got a lot going on. And it turns out it's perfect. When I'm driving home, I call them and they love it. So what you do is you take anything you want to achieve, whether it's closer relationship with your parents or feeling more connected to a higher power.
Hmm.
And you find a behavior that will do that for you. You make it really, really, really simple. So notice I'm not meditating for 30 minutes. It's just a moment on the shore,
Yep.
or it's just dial my parents.
Yes.
And then it's really, really easy. Now, if it's easy, it doesn't require much motivation. If it's hard, you will. So you design for the reality that our motivation won't always be high. So you make it super easy as you can, and then you slot it into your routine. You find where it fits naturally. What does it come after? That's why it's like, after I pee, I do 2 push-ups. Okay, that's where it fits for me. Weird. And it's not 20 push-ups, it's 2. After I start the car and there's a certain point on the road, that's when I call my parents. So
Perfect.
so you use your existing routine to remind you to do the new habit. So going to the water's edge is the reminder of pause, give thanks, connect yourself to this day and what you can get done in this day. And that
It's
is a
such a
hack.
great, yeah.
Yeah.
I so my son is 6, and
Hmm.
he was starting to have like some like hard time getting to sleep and stuff, and so I would like lay with him, and we started it actually started to become habit that I'm not a blessings girl. Like I'm not, I'm not a blessings. I didn't grow up like saying blessings at my bedside or any of that, and I never really had a gratitude routine. But
Hmm.
that was when it was like the perfect time to teach him gratitude. And we would do like I would say, like, do you want to do a meditation, Birdie? I don't know how to even do a meditation, but I
Yeah.
would just like walk him through this stuff. And that was when, and so it's now part of our nightly routine. Like,
So good. And so it fit there. So you did a
yep,
great job, right? It fits there
it was
naturally.
random though.
You might have tried other places. I mean, part of the process, and I talk about it as practice and revise. Put it into practice. If it works, keep going. If it doesn't, revise it. Notice it's not practice and force yourself. It's not practice and beat yourself up. It's practice and revise. Just like, oh, those shoes didn't fit very well. Let me try some other shoes. Or those shoes didn't look like I hoped. The specific habit you're doing with your son, as you know, is such a good one in so many ways. So many habiteers, and habiteers are people that have done tiny
I've never
habits.
heard that before. A
Habiteers,
habiteer.
yes, habiteer. And
Like a mouseketeer, but a habiteer.
musketeer, an engineer, mountaineer,
Okay, got
habiteer.
it, got it.
It's after my head hits the pillow, I will think of one thing from the day for which I'm grateful. And it just, one, helps them. I mean, gratitude creates hope, and that's a whole different discussion. Gratitude leads to hope. It's a great way, hopefully, to let go of most of the day. But what it also does, when your brain knows at the end of today, I'm going to have to think of something I'm grateful for, you're watching for that all day long. So that means you're living your day differently. You're watching for things to be grateful for rather than things to be annoyed about or outraged about or upset about. So as simple as that habit is, and habits that are very, very tiny can have a massive impact if it's this kind of habit.
So in my nuanced way of thinking of things, I'm thinking of like the action isn't necessarily the habit. The action is the ritual or the routine or whatever. And the habit is once you kind of have it. How do you
Once it's
define
automatic.
that it's
It's a great
nuanced?
question.
Yeah.
Habit is an ambiguous word. There's at least 3 different ways we use that word, and they're not the same, but they all relate kind of to behavior. When I talk about habits in the technical sense, it's a behavior you do quite automatically. You do without deciding, without deliberation. And so in my book, I map out this spectrum, this continuum. There are some behaviors that are decisions. Like right now I'm wearing a green shirt, bam, and I made a decision on what shirt to wear because Jill, I didn't want to just show up in my white T-shirt. I didn't want to
You
look
could have.
terrible
You
for
could
you.
have.
I know, you told me that later. So I decided. So every morning I decide what I'm going to put on. That's a decision. Whereas brushing my teeth, I don't decide, am I brushing my teeth or not? I do it on autopilot. So those are on the extreme ends of the spectrum. And then there are behaviors that will fall, all the way in the middle. So a habit is something that we do quite automatically, but there's no line on that spectrum of here's where it changed from just a regular behavior into a habit. It's all a matter of degree.
Do you believe that there is a length, you hear this 21 days to a habit, 31 days, 50 days, 90 days. What's your belief on that?
I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is that's wrong.
That's
And
what
people have been misled. I'm glad I'm not offending you, Jill.
Not at all. I was thinking that
No,
people are like, oh, when 21 days comes around, this is going to be ingrained in my system. And I'm like,
no.
God,
Oh
no.
my gosh.
I've
No,
fallen off the wagon.
that's not how it works. Repetition does not create habits. How many times have I gotten dressed in the morning and put on this shirt? Hundreds. Is it a habit? No. Every day I'm deciding. How many times has your child picked up his room or her room? Does your child have the habit? No. Okay, so there's just, and then there are things like, boom, hand your daughter a new phone. How many days does it take to make that a habit? 0. She automatically would carry that around. So I'll just say this, and then we can talk about what actually works. When people say, and there's some big books out there that say this, that say, oh, it's repetition creates habits. Look at the study they're citing. It mostly comes back to one study published in 2009 that included 39 people. And that study was not designed to show a causal relationship. It's correlation. It's correlation. So the more you do a behavior, the more likely it is to be automatic. It does not show that repetition causes it. And so people perpetuating this either haven't read the study carefully, or they have and they just, I don't know, they're being sloppy, or it sounds nice. So no, it's absolutely not that repetition creates the habit, and it's actually bad and dangerous to believe that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually think that's good news because I'd rather know the real.
Yeah.
in my life and not rely on a stat and think that I'm failing because of it, right? Like that I could be,
That's
you
part
know
of
what
the
I'm
day
saying?
right
Like
there.
saying I've been doing this for 21 days and this should be, why am I not motivated? So I think it's more important that we know the skinny on all this stuff. So you talked about what does work.
Bam. Emotions. Emotions create habits. Wow. And that's a
Wow.
chapter title in my book, probably my
Yeah.
favorite chapter.
We will link to his book
Boom,
in the
boom,
notes,
boom.
everybody. Yeah.
So it turns out, and once you see this clearly, you'll see it all around you. You'll see it in your kids, yourself, your pets, even. So on the lanai here
Mm-hmm.
in Maui, I'm training this one gecko out of so many geckos. I'm training one to come to me and eat out of my hand. It's not repetition. It's what is going to give that
Effort.
gecko the biggest emotional charge? Is it lemons? No. Is it banana? A little bit. Is it mango? Yep, she loves mango. So even just an hour ago, I was out there and she would come to this spot and I hand her mango and she eats out of my hand. So what the way it works all the way from geckos to humans is when we do a behavior and our brain associates a positive emotion with it, whether it's pleasure or the feeling of success or the sense of relief, it can be those and others, then that behavior wires in and becomes more automatic. So it's the role that emotion's playing. Emotion does lots of things for us, but one of them, it's the signal to our brain, wow, I want to repeat this behavior. So when the gecko first tasted the mango that I put out there, I imagine in her little head, it was like, wow, I feel successful in getting something really sweet. I'm going to do this again. So what you do in the tiny habits method, rather than just leaving emotions to chance, you do a technique we call celebration, and you cause yourself to feel successful as you're doing the behavior to wire it in. So you're hacking your emotion to make the behavior wire in quickly. And if you're
Okay.
good at this, you can form the habit within a few days. In the free 5-day program that I've offered since 2011,
I was just going to ask about that. Go
yeah,
ahead.
bam. Yeah, so week after week, we look at the results and the data, and well over 50% of people report. Oh, I should look at the. I actually just tweeted this. I should go look at it.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of people report that one of their habits became very automatic or automatic within 5 days. And then if you count in the category of somewhat automatic, then it's like 85% of people. So in other words, by using the tiny habits method, most people will wire in a habit, substantially wire in a habit within 5 days.
That's amazing. So I am signing up for it. I just discovered, I actually didn't know you had that. I'm so sorry, but I was like, doing my research. I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this. So we will of course link to that. So do you think a good place for us to start is, obviously reading the book and really understanding, because I think understanding the background of this is
Yeah.
really important, so we're not fooling ourselves, right?
Yeah. Well, here's where to start. I'll give a few starting points.
Yeah.
One, go to audible.com and listen to the free preface that you do not have to pay for.
Okay.
So Audible screwed up a little bit on my book.
And do they have
And
like a whole chapter?
well, and so as part of
Okay.
working with them, I said, okay, now what you need to do to help me is take the preface, pull it in front of the paywall so anybody can. So that preface is only for the audiobook. And Jill, I won't give it
Nice.
totally away, but the morning I went to record it here at the studio in Maui, I went to my partner and said, Denny, I just wrote this. I'm going to record it this morning. I think I'm going to add it to the preface. And it's about my speaking voice, which there's a big saga there. And I
Okay.
read him what I'd just written because I didn't want to go into the studio and read it for the first time. And I broke down and I cried 3 different times because it was so, well, when you listen, you'll know. It was so, it was tap. And then my partner also was moved and he hadn't heard, never heard that from me. So go there. And yeah, the audiobook, I was so happy to narrate it myself. You can do that. I
Yeah,
would
you did a great job. That's what
I
I listened to it on.
okay, good. Okay, and then I would get the print book, and I would do the 5-day program.
Yeah.
So if you so you could
Yeah.
do the free preface, buy the print book, and then do the 5-day
5-day
program
program.
and do those together. That's what I would do.
Well, I am going to. I think I actually may have signed up today. I haven't checked my
Good.
confirmation emails yet, but that is great. Well, this is, I think, such an important part. My goal is to introduce women over 40 in their 40s and 50s and 60s to new solutions and new tools that may improve, that will improve their health,
So
their
good.
skin, their everything, their bodies, themselves, right? And I really came back to, you can't use any of these tools without figuring out how you're going to integrate. So even like a facial laser or something that's going, or a new mask, or
Yeah.
a meditation device. There's some great things out there. You have to start with the habit building and the ritual building and building routines for yourself that are realistic. So you integrate them so they don't end up in the graveyard drawer.
Yeah. When you get more skilled at creating habits, and that's what my teaching in my book is all about. You can get, just like you learn to drive, and at first it was intimidating and scary, and now it's effortless. You might look at habit formation as intimidating, scary, but when you learn it in the right way, then it becomes really easy. So you can create habits quickly and easily. And Jill, I've never heard it quite expressed in that way, but you're right. Then all the other products and programs that you've invested
Yeah.
in that require consistency, you optimize all those investments, because then you can just wire in those habits. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're leveraging, or you're reclaiming all that invested time and energy and making those products and programs more effective in your life, because
Yeah.
now you can create habits quickly and easily.
Yeah. Otherwise, they're just sitting there and you're not figuring out how to
And
regularly use anything that you need repetition on.
and it makes you feel bad every time you see it. There's this little pang of like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I paid this much, or why am I not using this, and da 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 da. Yeah. So rather than feeling bad, you feel good.
Well, I will say this is such a treat for me personally, but I'm imagining for everyone listening. I cannot wait to share this episode with everyone. And I am going to, of course, I'll put all your links in all the stuff we talked about. But before we sign off today, how can people find you?
Two websites. Well, come to Maui and come surfing with you in the morning. That's one way.
Yeah, we may be there. My son and we may be very, very
Let me
shortly.
know. Let me know.
Love it.
But for people anywhere that aren't here on the island, bjfogg.com or tinyhabits.com. Those are good starting points.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I just can't thank you enough. This was really a treat, and I've been like waiting and waiting and waiting to get this on the book. So thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you, mahalo. I really, this is so important, and it's so good to have a way to share with your listeners that
Yeah.
change is easier than you think if you do it in the
Yeah.
right way, and you change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad.
I'm just happy to hear that I'm not too set in my ways, so that my emotions can drive this, because I do feel like a lot of us women, are like, yeah, no.
You can do it.
So
Yes. And
anyway,
you have this, how it's like you haven't watched like some series on TV and a friend goes, oh my gosh, you have such a good experience ahead of you. I envy you because she's watched it, right?
Right.
That's what I'm feeling now with, oh my gosh, you guys, you have this ahead of you. You can understand behavior. You can learn how habits work. You can create all these new habits. You've got this great thing ahead of you. I'm excited.
well, thank you so much. Such a treat. Aloha again, and we will meet again on the podcast, I'm sure.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.